in a way, I was holding myself back from having those experiences because it's what I thought about myself. It was my projection upon myself as to what I was worth, based on my experiences, of course, but it was my own entrapment. It's kind of sad in a way because I feel like I missed so many opportunities to create in this capacity because of my own fears, rather than the role somebody else put me in. So I feel like I was able to break through something myself, and now I came out on the other side as a more valuable collaborator because that's how I see myself. And I think that's really powerful.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Haley Bennett is an actor. On the occasion of the release of her movie Swallow, she sat down with me in New York City to talk about the work. Just a quick note, when Haley came into the room, she was holding what she calls her workbook. It's basically her script, bound in hardback, filled with notes of various kinds. It stayed on her lap the whole interview, and she refers to it a number of times. Just as we started recording, she told me that there's actually 2 workbooks that she used for Swallow.
Well, why 2?
So one or more comprised of like pictures, photographs without words. And then the other one is script and notes and words and dreams and visions and any kind of antidotes from my preparation. Or...
And what do those things like images and stuff like that?
It just evokes kind of feelings.
Okay, this is
images are really powerful. Along with sound, it's like a whole sensory kind of envelopment that I like to put myself in the middle of when I'm working on a set. Music, auditory experiences, it allows you to transport yourself, or your inner self rather, to a different place, a different state of mind. So I think that's kind of at least that's my experience. No, it's a scary kind of thing to talk about your process, I guess.
Yes.
You want to allow there to be magic when you watch a film, or when you watch a specific performance. If I knew exactly how Joaquin Phoenix tapped into that Joker character, it would be a little bit like, oh, I don't want to know. There's things you don't want to give away. There's things you don't want to know.
I know.
So, but I didn't go to acting school. So I so relied on educating myself through other people's cinematic experiences, and from their insight and sharing their processes to inform and inspire me. So it's kind of a tightrope. It's kind of this tightrope that you walk to talk about your process and to want to preserve the intrigue.
Yeah.
The mystery.
I'm imagining with this film, there is one day going to be a young woman who is so inspired by this movie, like my friend was inspired by a woman under the influence to act.
Yeah.
And then,
I was as well inspired.
This is a
woman under the influence.
This is a connection to that film.
Oh my God, thank you.
Okay, then that's a big thing for me to say. I'm a Cassavetes.
I'm a Cassavetes
freak. You're a freak.
Yeah. He's one of those naturalistic filmmakers that was so influential to me in my early 20s.
Yes, that's amazing.
And him and his relationship with Gina Rollins and the things that they were able to create together.
Yes. I heard you talk about when you read the script for Swallow, you were shocked, disturbed, excited, beguiled. Then you had a really good meeting with Carlo.
Well, first, there was a a middle to this experience. There was the doubt. There was my self-doubt of going, can I put myself in those characters' shoes, and can I allow myself to be revealed in this way? And kind of that outside of yourself thing, like imagining you are an audience member. And you don't ever want to come from that place. You want to, and my true feelings towards it were all of those things. But of course, I had that hesitation of like, that fear of like, can I do this? And then more importantly, what is Carlo's intention? Mm-hmm. What is the story that he wants to tell? What is his vision? Is this going to be an exploitative process? Because there's some very questionable things happening. It deals with some really difficult subjects, body horror, swallowing these violent things, them coming back to the surface, and how Carlo, what his vision was, how he planned on telling the story. And was it of, the story is about a woman unraveling as she struggles to regain her independence and to find herself. And I wanted to make sure that was like, we were focusing on the heart of a character who is dealing with trauma. Yeah. I approached it from a very psychological place. And of course, it has all of those squirm-worthy moments that make people kind of afraid to watch it, because you don't want to watch not a lot of people want to see women doing harm to themselves. And that is a really tricky thing in cinema, and I think with audiences. And you certainly don't want to see a woman who's pregnant harming herself. So I think, we had a lot of conversations. I serve as executive producer on the film, and that was really important to me. Just to ensure that we were telling the story from the right light. Yeah. And through meeting him, I learned what his true intentions were, which was to tell his grandmother's story in the most delicate and sensitive way. And that his grandmother's story, though it was set in the 40s, 50s, his grandmother was institutionalized for OCD, obsessive hand washing, these ritualized behaviors against her will. She was lobotomized. It still is a very timely and relevant story. Yes.
And when I heard that about his grandmother, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I wanted to know how that kind of information in general works on you as an actor in the moment, but then in specific, this information.
I realize this is a universal story, but my approach to discovering and finding the character was very, very personal. Yes. And and it's of my experience of those situations, I guess.
People controlling.
Other people. Control over women's bodies, shame being a huge part of her story, trauma, conforming, numbing oneself to survive, to fulfill a function, performance, baby maker, no individuality, that none of us are perfect, to stay in a box. I mean, to be loved for me and not as a host or a wife, but as an individual. I mean, that's literally, like, these are things that I can see.
You're reading off
my workbook.
Notes you made.
And I was just like, I picked this up last night before a Q&A, and it's it's this incredible.
These are notes you made early on.
This was pre-production. Yeah. The film is so multi-layered. Yes. And it sounds weird to say that for like somebody that's started and produced something, obviously, you know, you want to sing the praises of your work, and that's exciting. But truly, from my standpoint, at least, for me, it was quite complicated and complex.
Speaking of John Cassavetes, Cassavetes has a film called The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, which people say you can read it
Yeah.
almost as his relation with Hollywood producers wanting to control his creative self.
Mm-hmm. Oh, bless him.
How much of this can I read, this movie Swallow, as your approach to Hollywood trying to control you as a commodity in your early life?
It even goes back, I would say, further than that. And I could say that for the character Hunter. Like, this is a parallel journey, of course, for me, because that's just the way that I work, is to find the truths within myself to develop an authentic character. Am I making sense? I'm not sure if I'm making sense. So for Hunter, this is even more historical than where we meet her in the script. And that is, we have to have gone through something to find ourselves in our current situations. Mm-hmm. So what is that for me? What is that for Hunter? Of course, I focus on my own experiences, I guess. And I also look at every film as an opportunity to learn and to grow. And for me, the content did match the process. I was finding my voice along with this character, but that was fully intentional. I think when I was doing things that I didn't know that I was capable of doing. And that's kind of, I think, where Hunter was at with the objects. They're her domain. It's something that she has control over. But it's communicated very early on that she's not worth anything. But by the way, that's what she thinks about herself. So of course she puts herself. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And so, she finds herself in this very oppressive situation with this very patriarchal family. But what did it take to get her here? And soon you discover different facets of her past that have enforced this trauma. It was a real journey of discovery and also of self-discovery.
When I saw it a second time, like the first time I really felt this was a great performance, but the second time I appreciated it even more. And I appreciated the filmmaking that was in conjunction with your performance more. The two were
in harmony.
In harmony.
Yeah.
And that you
rarely
see.
And that really has, thank you for saying that. And that's a testament to the openness and the humility of the director.
Yeah.
In allowing a fluidness of creation and allowing everyone to kind of transcend beyond their traditional roles. Because the fact that a lot of the framework was done by women, Carlo's very worried about the male gaze and that his male gaze would interrupt the telling of this story. But the collaborative nature was beyond anything that I have ever experienced. And I think that is truly because Carlo knew this was a universal story, but a woman's story. And I felt quite protective of Hunter, but that's probably because of how personal my process is. But it was such a thoughtful group of collaborators. And again, we only had 18, 19, I think 20, I always say 18, it's 20 days of shooting.
It's crazy.
And the pre-production was very, very useful. We talked a lot about the third act of the film, the subtlety of that exchange that Hunter has with the person that she turns to when she has no one else to turn to. and the simplicity of that moment,
Mm.
and it not being this extraordinarily heightened situation.
Mm-hmm.
It just being a raw form of exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of that depended on my incredible scene partner,
Yes.
Dennis O'Hare. And the fact that we shot the film in chronological order was also extremely useful.
Mm-hmm.
Was that it was a genuine progression of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I had done a load of preparation, as you can see here, my relic, my workbook, I feel really safe with it. It's really odd. Like, I feel like it's the source of my truth.
Mm.
And the reason I wanted to make this film, I love watching people from their New York windows. So cool.
As we get this nice siren, because you mentioned New York, and now we have to have the siren.
This happened, that last take in the film, the last scene in the film was one take between Dennis and I, and there was a holding pattern. The holding pattern of the airplanes changed, so it was every time we would try to restart. So we just had to go hold, we would wait.
Oh God.
And then we would go back into the scene. And it was the take that was used, it was one take. And it was in between all of these interruptions between.
Oh my God. When stuff like that is under the wire like that, does it actually help in situations like that? When the scene is so fraught with
the work
things?
was so focused. I think a lot of that was in part to the fact that I was pregnant.
Yeah.
I think everyone thought I was just really very serious about my work, but really I was going home. Like, nobody knew that I was pregnant. I was so sick, and I would just go home and pass out because I was so tired, and I was in my first trimester. And I think everyone thought possibly I was very, very dull. And the fact that everyone was under probably 30 on the set, there was only 30 people on set, which is not of my experience in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to being on sets that are like 200 people
Three
and
times
I
that,
disappear.
Yeah.
But it was a very young crew. There was only 30 of them, maybe 25, 30 of them in primary filming. And everyone was having a great time, except me. I was having a miserable time, and I was enjoying doing the work.
Yeah.
But I was miserable because I was, it was very inconvenient, the timing.
You found out you were pregnant the day before filming on this film.
Mm-hmm.
What does that information about your own life, body, and the ironic thing of this happening with this movie, what does that do for you in that moment before you're about to embark on this?
I mean,
it's crazy.
I think the moment you find out that you're pregnant, if it's not, a planned pregnancy, is wildly complicated. But I don't think, you don't have time to process the implications of, you just think about, the next step or what is, like you think from a practical standpoint, like, okay, now it's not like someone waves a wand and you're like, okay, now I'm on the verge of motherhood. It really takes a while to come to terms with the fact that you're on the verge of motherhood. And I thought about that, and it being like wildly coincidental that had happened to us and to me before I embarked on this journey of playing Hunter. Of the fact, like, so many people, I think, have considered, okay, well, Hunter's pregnant, and is she intentionally hurting her child? Which so much happens between when she finds out that she's pregnant and the end of the film. But there is this interesting moment between like being pregnant and really coming to the terms with the fact that you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a whole period of time to where it really sits in, and I think that's you finally come to terms with it around like 9 months, and you're super pregnant.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I guess. And even, I think actually you don't fully realize what it means until, you have this, your body's changing and you give birth. I think that's when you're like, okay, this is real. This is the rest of my life.
You're right.
But it is an incredibly, and I know, I feel like, it's difficult for a man to understand. You know, you're just like, wow, it's this amazing thing that you're not really a huge part of.
Right. But for you to be prepared to film these scenes,
it was so necessary. You know what? It was wildly healing for me.
Wow, yeah.
And actually, it's exactly what I needed. It was a bit of a catharsis, I think, and I learned so much by portraying this character. And I was able to untangle some things. And the fact that it came before motherhood was a huge gift. And the fact that I finally was at a point in my life where I was ready to have a child, and the person that I was having the child with was a loving and supportive partner. It was a gift. It was a really beautiful moment of growth and consideration. And the fact that it happened when it did is kind of a miracle. But a lot of healing took place, I think, from, and that's what I said. I hope to learn things from each film that I do. And it was a very empowering film to be a part of, a very empowering experience.
You talked about how thankful you were that you were able to reveal yourself through this film, and share your pure
essence.
Essence. How are you now going to continue to do this in this industry? This shouldn't be rare.
No, and it is. I mean, at least for me. But again, it's kind of, it was rare for me. It might not be rare for somebody else. It was rare for me because in this symbiotic way, where the process met the content, I was learning to voice and reveal my true self, and learning how to be intimate while having boundaries, if that makes sense. I can express through this beautiful medium that I've dedicated my life to. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to shy away from, I can express myself. That I'm worthy, that my opinions, experiences, even if they're wrong, are worth something. But in a way, I was holding myself back from having those experiences because it's what I thought about myself. It was my projection upon myself as to what I was worth, based on my experiences, of course, but it was my own entrapment. It's kind of sad in a way, because I feel like I missed so many opportunities to create in this capacity because of my own fears, rather than the role somebody else put me in. So I feel like I was able to break through something myself, and now I came out on the other side as a more valuable collaborator, because that's how I see myself. And I think that's really powerful. My early 20s was a nightmare. I truly didn't know my worth, my value, the way that I wanted to work. I was kind of winging it. And you can't really, you can, and people do it and turn out great performances. But it was a completely different process. And it took a long time for me to discover a way that I really like to work. it was a really fortunate situation that Carlo encountered me, and that he had written this beautiful script. It was like a kind of like one of those divine interventions. So how to recreate that scenario, I don't know. I have done meaningful work and work that I'm really excited about since Swallow. I recently finished principal photography on Hillbilly Elegy with Ron Howard. He was extremely collaborative himself, and Vanessa Taylor, the writer. But again, I was coming, from having done Swallow and having also done Double All the Time, where I had a different confidence and a different, and is it about confidence? It's like the combination of confidence and humility, and wanting to service the story in the most productive, valuable, practical ways. And so I can officially say that Swallow was the impetus of that. Yeah, it's been really interesting approaching work since then. I find that I'm more fearless. I find that I'm more raw, I'm more vulnerable, and of course, some of those fears of inadequacy crop back up. Who am I to challenge, excite, or add my thoughts and feelings towards a character? Who am I to influence the building blocks of what then becomes what we see on in a film? Who am I to think I can compose in this way, especially with folks like Ron Howard? Like, that was really terrifying. But that's kind of what I've learned. It is kind of part of our job, right? and actually, people want that.
Right.
They get excited about that.
Right.
Or at least now but before, and again, it's all about a state of mind of like believing in your point of view.
Yeah.
And so I guess if I could impart anything to a young actor is to develop your point of view, to put in the hard work, to approach things fearlessly, and to believe in your point of view, and that actually it is encouraged. And don't be a jerk or a brat or a diva. Be humble, but to get involved in those creative conversations early on.
On behalf of the world, I want to thank you for this.
Thank you.
I mean that in a real way. I'm like, this is a contribution
thank you.
to the world.
Thank you, I appreciate
this performance in this movie.
Wow, thank you.
And I think
that was me opening a Coke.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things for me that I just want to say, that no child should be taken away from the experience of freedom, fun, innocence, love, and like no child should be deprived of those experiences. And trauma is a real thing, and that people that have experienced trauma, I think that it's important that people are talking about and taking the stigma away from mental illness. I truly believe this, to be able to, because the compulsion is just the vehicle that, for Hunter, is the thing that leads her to awareness of this very deeply buried and hidden trauma. Yeah. And it is this thing that wakes her from her apathy, that wakes her up. And sometimes I think we need to go through those experiences to find ourselves. And that is what I think is important, and what that is the heart of the story that I wanted to tell.
Haley Bennett, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.